I'm pretty excited about what we're going to talk about today. So not that we know anything about Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. We don't have any inside information. We're not personal friends. I have no tap on their phone, but just based on what we've seen from social media, because I know you're a big follower of all of this.
Oh, sure.
On social media, and what we've read on the interwebs and things like that, we decided it would be kind of fun to bring in Rebecca, who is my wife and also our producer. When things go well, if we notice episodes that are poorly done, it's because I was attempting to do it on my own. But she also happens to be our in-house expert on the social media buzz related to Kim and Kanye, and it all pertains to co-parenting at the moment.
Boy, does it ever.
So we thought, why not jump on the trend? So I'd like to introduce Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, guys.
This is her first time joining us on the microphone. I tried to get her on camera with us, but we'll save that for a different day.
No, thank you.
So a different day, possibly.
Probably not.
So in the meantime, what we can agree on.
She's the cute third of this, just saying.
She is. Yeah. We're going to talk about Kim and Kanye. To do that, we need to know what the deal is. And again, disclaimer alert, we have no real knowledge of anything accurate. We're all basing this off of what we've seen in social media and on the internet, and it all could be completely false.
So it's about like one of our Reddit.
Right, exactly.
Kinds of things we've been doing for a podcast.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Rebecca, what in the world is going on with Kim and Kanye?
A lot. Yeah, they've got a lot going on. And it kind of made me think the other day when I was reading an article, which I just, for some reason, cannot stop reading about them, was that she actually mentioned co-parenting. And so we were sitting there drinking coffee, and I was like, this is really interesting. She's actually saying the word co-parenting. And unfortunately, there's battles are really, really public, although they do mirror a lot of everyday problems that we all have when things get a little ugly with a separation or divorce, especially when there are children involved.
Yeah, but they have so much more going on.
Yeah, I think they're a good example of anything magnified by 100.
Yes.
So, and they just have an audience, that is obsessed with watching them and watching the whatever is going on, the train wreck. So
it does tell us that, it doesn't seem to matter where you live in the world or what your socioeconomic status is or anything. I remember being on an island one time and talking to someone that worked there about what I do. And she was like, oh, we need you here. You need to move here. And I went, this is absolutely paradise. Why would anybody have a problem they need to talk to a therapist about? And she said, well, especially, family and marital stuff. She said, if you're married, if you've got kids, you have issues to talk to a therapist about. So
absolutely.
It's that sometimes we think, oh, they're so rich or they're so famous that they don't have any problems. But then, like you say, too, they've got an audience built in watching every move they make.
And I think they're surrounded, too, by people that are constantly accommodating them. And so, when you get into a situation where you really don't have a lot of control and you really are at the mercy of the court or the other party, it probably zaps them on some level that we can't even understand.
Well, here's where I want to break in and say, what is going on though? Give us the deeds.
So
I don't know how long they've been separated or
I was going to say hot topic. Let's talk about what's going on. So from what I understand, being the pop culture junkie that I am, is that Kim and Kanye have been married for several years. I want to say something less than 10 years, maybe something like that. And, he's kind of helped her morph into they've become this really interesting styled family that people are becoming obsessed with. Their children are named kind of exotic names and interesting and all that. And so he's sort of went off a little bit last year by running for president. And I think from what I understand, that may have started the kind of separation in Kim's eyes from what I've read and seen on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which is, a great show. And so I think she, because they're a very controlled family, the Kardashians, is as much as they share, they're also very calculated in what they share. And they're, so I think the family was kind of like, wow, we can't trust him. We don't know what he's going to say. So
kind of a loose cannon.
Yeah. He had made a comment that I don't know that I should mention about their first daughter. When Kim was pregnant with her, he had said something in a press conference about how they had considered not having her. And I think it humiliated Kim. So, and then that was a big red flag for the family that like, okay, we don't know what he's going to say, and that's not going to be okay in our family. So,
and that would be the worst thing, I'm always thinking about the child. That would be the worst thing that could possibly ever be out there.
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's true or not. I mean, it's highly inappropriate,
for a
obviously.
child to ever think that or know that was said by a parent.
And she's like 7 or 8 or something. I mean, so she's certainly, can
understand. She'll be old enough to look things up too.
No doubt. I mean, I'm sure, she has a TikTok account. I'm sure she knows what's going on.
Well, and that points out how perfect these folks have to be. If we're thinking about trying to maintain a sanitized version of life for your child as long as possible, that's really hard to do when your parents are Kim and Kanye and everything they say gets blasted everywhere and it's not going away anytime soon. And you have to be real careful. And, Kanye's, I don't think of careful when I think of Kanye.
Right.
No, I don't. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, he's definitely someone who, in I think the controlled environment, he can be kind of like the eccentric artist, and he's so interesting, and you can have little mess ups and slip ups, and like, oh, that's part of his sort of mystique. But when there's a line that's crossed, I think, in every family, whether you're famous or not, where it's like, oh, this isn't cute, this isn't okay, and we also now can't control this situation. So I think that's kind of how it started. I'm sure there was way more going on that we don't know about. And then they have sort of separated, and instead of, separating, and like most Hollywood couples, when they separate, you don't really hear about it except like, oh, we love each other. We're just letting you know how
consciously
co-parenting, uncoupling, yes.
I still love that one.
Just like the most fuzzy, warm, like happiest divorce that's ever happened.
Right.
Kanye is taking this like to the craziness, like literally doing like movie poster styles of him and Kim Kardashian's boyfriend, like head to head as Marvel characters,
or like a fight poster,
exactly
like a boxing promotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And
so he's Taylor Swift at the Grammys unhinged at the moment. I guess
he keeps posting things on Instagram, then deleting them, and so I'm sure the news medias are just like screenshotting like crazy anytime he posts anything.
Constant.
But when this first started a few weeks ago, he was accusing Kim of using their oldest daughter to, do a TikTok account. And he felt that was inappropriate. And so that was kind of what made me think about this, is like, oh, okay, we have issues like, parents in our office that like one parent's like, oh, I don't feel like my child's ready for that kind of social media.
Right.
And instead of, us having that problem in like, somewhere, Oklahoma or Virginia or wherever, this is like on Instagram with everybody has 1 billion followers. Right. So, I mean, it's just an interesting.
But that is a great example of, they do have a lot of the same issues. It just seems to be magnified because yes, I see that a lot in terms of either what the parent has posted somewhere,
right,
and whether, it came up recently in a case where the parent was doing some very interesting TikToks that were inappropriate, and then wanted to share her TikToks with her child in session in a therapeutic visitation session.
Did the word narcissist appear anywhere in the TikToks?
I was like, what part of this do you not understand? It's not appropriate for your child ever to see, much less why would you want to share it when it's the first time you've seen your child in 2 years? Yeah. But, so speaking of that, does he have a mental health diagnosis?
So it is, obviously, this is just from what we've read and what we know, but I've actually heard interviews with him as well. I listened to a really lengthy interview with him not too long ago, which I actually found fascinating. It was before the divorce separation kind of thing. And he was talking about his collapse with different businesses and it was a really long conversation. And he did address in the interview that he has bipolar. And that he was actually talking about his medication and how he is a very creative person. And he also is, it was a combination of it dulling his creativity
Sure.
and messing with his body that he didn't like. He was saying that he had a hard time, keeping weight off and all that when he was on whatever kind of medication he was on. And so
he was on it and off of
he
it.
talked about how he prefers to be off of it.
Of course.
And so I'm purely speculating, but I'm guessing if maybe he is maybe not taking the medication. I don't really know.
Well, that's the number one category of folks in our practices who get off their medication.
Totally. That is also
advisedly.
very similar to Oklahoma.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you start to feel good. You don't want to be on your
Totally.
medication. And then it just goes crazy. And that's what my mother was. My mother was bipolar.
And you think you don't need the medication because you're doing just fine.
And you feel
don't
great.
realize it's a medication that is helping you do that. Or they start to self-medicate with other things.
Right.
And here in Oklahoma, the two I hear the most about, the self-medicating, is marijuana, first of all. Now they can do that with a prescription, in quotes. And then alcohol, and interestingly enough, tequila more often than anything else.
You know
Tequila's
why?
not my friend.
I was going to say, do you know why though? Because tequila, from what I understand, is the only alcohol that is an upper. Like it actually
Very interesting.
makes you feel good.
I've never
like,
heard that.
Apparently, whatever is in tequila, at least temporarily, obviously, this is not
Right.
a long-term solution, but it is
Right.
an alcohol that is an upper. It doesn't depress. It makes you more relaxed, more happy.
Wow. Always
So,
wondered about that because it does come up a lot because I
Yeah.
will get nosy about those things. And so, yes, it's very normal that they don't stay on their meds. And then we will hear, you and I in our different professions will hear from the co-parent that, he or she must be off their meds again because it is a quick difference, just like
I
we're
was gonna say,
seeing.
it's obvious to the other folks around you.
Yes,
Maybe
it's
when you're
just
going
like it
off.
is in the news or on his posts. It's very usually more evident in ours or only in terms of the texts or the emails that they're getting from the other parent.
Right. And it creates a really intractable problem for the court too, because you want to tell the person to stay on their meds. They're fine, especially with bipolar. They can be fine when they're on their meds.
Oh, very.
And it's very manageable, but they're going to come off very often. Folks will come off their medications and at unpredictable times.
Right.
And it can take a long time to get back in front of a court.
Right.
And sometimes it bubbles. You have the suspicion that they're off because of their communications, but it doesn't reach a crisis inflection point that would give you enough to go into the court on an emergency order, which would be immediate. So you wind up having to go through your parenting coordinator, go through the guardian ad litem, and that process takes time. And in the meantime, you're just sitting there as the parent who doesn't have that particular problem. And you're thinking, when is this going to boil over? And
And you can even see the many co-parents have told me that they can see the pattern, the intervals that the person, whether they're rapid cycling with their bipolar or is it seasonal or, even a certain holiday or whatever can trigger it.
Well, and I think I'm again guessing, but I think in Kanye's case, he associates he was talking about his medication and when he would potentially go off of it and on it. Whenever he's doing something that he feels requires a lot of his creativity, he tends to stop his medication or to slow it down. And he's putting out Donda right now, which drops, I believe, on the 22nd of this month. And so he's been doing all of these like really actually beautiful before his Instagram feed became about his family. It was beautiful. He would, in fact, I tuned in a couple of times on Sunday afternoon. You never knew exactly what time, but he would broadcast a live sort of dress rehearsal of Donda, which is this gorgeous, like, I think they're all black. I think a black choir, and they're all wearing black, and they're standing in this warehouse that he has procured for this purpose, I guess. And the light's coming in this beautiful way. And he's kind of performing. He's giving these sort of pre-concerts. And so I think he's really in a creative space right now.
Right.
And so I can imagine, even if he wasn't going through this family stuff, he would probably want to be backing off of his medication.
And this is just
bad timing. Yeah.
For context, it's February 2022.
Yes. Oh, yes.
As we're talking about this, so that when we say this month, that's what people know.
Yeah.
And, you can understand that he wants to have that creative space free of the medication. And I think with proper communication in advance, you could make that work.
Right.
If everyone were on the same page and we're communicating in advance and we're vulnerable with each other about their concerns and how to properly overall manage that situation, you would say, Kanye, we get it.
Right.
Like, you are a genius. You produce amazing art that millions and millions of people appreciate. We don't want to take that away from you or from all the people who appreciate your work. What we need to do is to allow you to be off that medication if that's what's necessary. If we can't change the dosage or something else, if it really is necessary for you to be off the medication, let's do that in a way where you're not going to be impacting the children.
Right.
You're not going to be creating this social media imprint that's harmful to everybody, and that we can then get you back onto the medication in a way that's helpful for you at a time when you're ready to be back on it.
Right.
And we have to have whatever safeguards in place are necessary to make that happen.
Right.
Because I personally don't think that the mental health of his children is a worthy sacrifice to his art.
Right. And that is where you get into the emergency guidelines. Is it of any kind of irreparable harm to the child? That is such a hard thing to figure out. I had a bipolar client one time that told me it was like having it's like they were a 2-story house with an attic and a basement. And when they're taking their medication, it's like it reduces all that to a one-story house.
That's really interesting.
They have so much of who they really are, and especially an ultra creative person, to just that flat, one-story ranch style house, and when they've got so much more to offer. And so I have all kinds of empathy for someone who has that happen to them.
Well, and I think in Kanye's case too, like harkening back to that interview that I listened to, it was like I don't remember what it was on, but it was really fascinating. He talked about how being with his family, like being with Kim and being with his kids, really helped him keep inspired to stay on his medication because he wanted to be the best for them. And I think that having in any situation where you have a couple that are, in this situation, if you kind of lose your inspiration for staying healthy and you feel the added pressure of all the anxiety and everything that's going on, I mean, he has that thing missing now. So, his family in his mind is gone, or he's losing them. So he's missing that sort of inspiration to stay healthy. And instead he's, in fight mode, which he probably, guess maybe even feels, okay, I need to be really not clouded by anything right now. I need to have all of my things going through my head right now. That'll, potentially help me or make the right decisions or whatever, but he's lost that sort of inspiration to keep himself in check and stay healthy.
And then the word you use, manage, good luck with anybody who's tasked with that job of managing all his.
Well, and he's also, according in the Instagram things, he's like longtime collaborators. He's, saying sayonara to, like, I mean, he's really destroying his surroundings at the moment, which is really, really sad to watch. So,
but that's the descent into the basement and they're usually okay with bringing things up out of the depressed phase. And so that's why they will take certain things, like the tequila, like you said, that will not depress them further, but will give them that lift that they're wanting. If their form of bipolar is to fall into depression.
I wonder with you guys too, the reason that it made me kind of think about it the other day, talk to Ron when I was reading the article, was I wonder if, Kim and Kanye or someone that was going through a very similar situation, maybe not on a social media stand, but how would you guide this situation if you guys had the opportunity? Like, what would you suggest? I think it would be.
So I think it all depends on, do we have a person who is like a Kanye? Because to me, that's the real outlier. If someone truly is a creative genius, and there is a great benefit to them being creative, and there is a true limitation on their creativity from this medication, and if it's the case that if they're temporarily off of it, they can produce great works that's good for society and can provide monetarily for the children, then I think there's the temptation to try to figure out something out of the box to work with that unique situation. But if it's not that situation, if it's just a person who is living their life, has a normal job, has the bipolar, then and is going off medication, then I think if I'm the judge, I'm going to say, your job isn't worth the damage you're going to do to your child. And if you're not on your medication, you're not seeing your child.
And I've even seen a few times where they've tasked the, I mean, I've seen some marital situations where the spouse is the one that has to actually administer the medication every day to make sure that they stay on their meds for either bipolar or schizophrenia, and especially for schizophrenia. And that is a horrible place to put the spouse, even.
Absolutely.
Because the person that needs it may be fighting them too, and being really awful to them about taking it. But there have actually been other times when the parents are, or the adults are separated, when someone else in the situation has been tasked with making sure they take their medication on a daily basis.
And if you've got that person, I think that's great. Otherwise, you have to create a buffer zone of time where you can have that person seeing a professional for a sufficient period of time to feel like they have gotten back into the rhythm of taking their medication. And once they've done that, then they can start their visitation again. Or you have supervised visits, and or you have monitored visits where the supervisor just sort of drops in and checks on things. Right. But that's the scary situation. Mental health is one of the scarier situations, but it's also an area that's eminently manageable so long as you have the person cooperating and complying with their medications and their treatment plan.
But getting their cooperation is so difficult, and maintaining it. And typically they do forecast the fact that they're off of it, though. They don't realize they are, but they do forecast that to their co-parent in their writings or in what they say. Right. I know I've been a PC in one of those cases where every time we were on such a cycle that every time the co-parent received something like that, and I got to where I could tell too in the writing that that's where we were again, and we would pull back on, and the judge gave the PC the power to do that, And I've
seen that with alcoholic clients too. Who are on SoberLink.
That too.
And SoberLink is a device that you can use. It works with your phone where you can breathe into it, and it'll take a blood alcohol level similar to something that you would get on the roadside from a police officer. Right. And for some of those clients, I would look at the SoberLink report, and that's how I would find out that they were drinking. Sometimes I would receive communications from them, and then I would say, oh, I know what the SoberLink is going to say. So exactly. You can look at it from both directions.
Yeah, I had one too that the parents at one point, quite a few years before I saw them as a PC, had done a lot of drugs together. And for some reason, I guess the father was the first contact in mom's phone, but she never did quite figure that out. But every time she would do a drug buy, for some reason, she would butt dial him. And so he would text me, usually on a weekend, and say, okay, she did it again. This is what she bought. And so I could just send her a thing saying, go for a drug test immediately. If you don't go within a certain number of hours, then you aren't seeing your child again for a while. And so those kinds of things can be written into PC orders to keep it from going back in front of the judge constantly, like you said, filing an ECO or something.
I think one of the things that makes me, wonder what you guys would say about the particular situation has to do with the kids. Because like, say, you have a co-parent in this situation that, I mean, clearly you can see it worldwide, but personally that they have a hard time kind of behaving in a certain way. They kind of do whatever they're going to do, and they're not able to regulate themselves very well. And so, you have your 4 kids that he wants to see, and he, may have every right to see, how as the other parent do you deal with that when you're not able to control what's going on, obviously, when you're not with them, and the other spouse is really erratic and, potentially will say things to them that aren't true, or, try to get them to be on their side, just really highly inappropriate communication. So how would you, deal with that?
Welcome to family law.
Best. Yeah, I was going to say, and that's at best. I mean, what if they get ultra depressed and you don't realize it? And
I mean, I didn't really want to go there, but I mean, they actually, according to another story that I read, he wanted to visit the kids, and he actually bought a house across the street from her new house, or her new house, but the house that they've shared together. And also, they always have bodyguards anyways. And, he was accusing her one day of basically having her own regulated, like supervised visitation. When he was playing with the kids, he wanted to be by himself with them. And she was like, well, these bodyguards need to be here. And he was saying, that's, her trying to control what's going on in my situation.
Well, she is controlling it. And in this case, it sounds protective.
Right.
Absolutely.
And in fact, if I'm, DHS or CPS or whatever it's called where you are, and I find out that she's allowing him in his current state to see the children unsupervised, I would have great concerns about that. So I think if he is really acting in that way, and he really is unpredictable in his behavior and erratic at the moment, she has every obligation, not just right, she has every obligation to suspend, curtail, supervise his visits until that can get under control. And she's actually doing him a kindness by permitting him to have that visitation and her provide the supervision. Because if I were her attorney, I would probably say, if he really is erratic, then we need to collect these things he's doing on social media, these things that he's saying. We need to put it in an emergency custody application and get it filed. Otherwise, if he were to be with the children and injure one of them, she would be at risk of having been found to have neglected them.
Right.
Yeah.
And both of them could lose the children.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the children are so used to the bodyguards around and having a lot of people around, people with cameras and whatever, that they don't really notice that. They're just focused on they get to see daddy for a while.
Exactly.
So, and I know a lot of your clients of mine would probably love to have the finances to have a bodyguard on,
But I mean,
on those visits.
That question that you posed, Rebecca, is at the heart of so much of what we have to work with.
Yeah. When one of the co-parents is, they're not both taking your course, so one of them is not necessarily the easiest to deal with. How do you still do a great job as a co-parent, respect the other co-parent, and also, take care of yourself and your children?
Well, there is something called the learned hand formula, which relates to tort law. But you take and I'm going to mistake it because I haven't taken tort law since law school, and I haven't done any tort cases ever. So I'll say that first. But you look at the amount of harm that you think is going to happen. That's at the risk of harm. And then you need to take the amount of precaution that is reasonable given that risk of harm. So in this case, when you have someone who's very erratic and has the money to travel anywhere in the world at a moment's notice on a private plane,
you bet,
then there's a high risk of harm if he is truly off the rails, for injury or abduction of the children.
Yes.
When you have something that's high of a risk of harm, then the reasonable precaution is going to be clamping down like a vice. If the risk of harm is that they may say something inappropriate about their new girlfriend to the child, then the reasonable precaution is not to interfere with the visitation. It's to communicate with the person and to say, please don't do this. And if you find out later, you file a contempt if there's an order sufficient to do that, or you talk with the parenting coordinator or the guardian ad litem. So the answer really is you have to take a look at the risk of harm to determine what precaution is reasonable under all the circumstances.
Right.
And it just varies.
Right. And in that case, there's such a divide between talking about something inappropriately and abduction.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's kind of like some of our conflict resolution stuff, where it's like, okay, you really do have to look at how much money do you want to spend to combat that,
Right.
as people that don't have unlimited funds that we usually work with.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And in his case, I mean, again, just looking at his Instagram, it's almost like he's entering a phase of like paranoia, accusing different people of like not being loyal to him and like, making all these sort of accusations and dividing clear sides where maybe there really isn't quite a straight line or so that's another area where it just, I would imagine, makes the other
Which can happen a lot with mania as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I was wondering if that has some maybe correlation.
And or with the self-medication with either something like meth or cocaine or.
Yeah. And I don't know that there's any indication that he's doing any substances other than just, high on the craziness of what's going on in his life.
Or he's right. Maybe there is a conspiracy against him to do these things.
I know with those things, you're always like, well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, I can only imagine the legal team situation that's going on both sides with attorneys working 24 hours a day, I'm sure.
That churn on that case is...
They're going to probably need their own court to just reserve.
Well, those attorneys are going to be able to hold court on their own yacht.
Probably.
No doubt.
They're going to put...
Yeah, this
I always
is going
joke
to
about
be a lot of legal fees.
Sometimes when I have clients who are just getting a little overboard in terms of what they want to do, I'll say, well, Rebecca does want me to put a pool in the backyard, so keep on doing it. I actually
do, so
yeah,
that would be great.
You can fund that pool, and then they laugh, and then they're like, no, tell Rebecca she's not getting a pool.
Yeah, I know I'm not, but I would really like one.
Well, I think that wraps up this conversation. There's going to be tons more to talk about with Kanye, and if y'all liked this type of conversation, let us know. And if there are other celebrity news related to co-parenting that you want us to get into that we can get Rebecca looking into, let us know that too, and we will, and we'll probably do it even if you don't let us know, because I had so much fun talking with Rebecca. So thank you, and again, remember, we have no idea about anything related to Kanye or Kim. All we know is what's going on in the media, and everything we said could have been incorrect and probably was to some degree.
But it's fascinating to find out how much we may have in common with them.
That's what I thought.
With our own stuff we work with. I
know. I mean, we kind of feel like these people are just like in a whole different planet sometimes, but I mean, it's pretty, their problems are pretty common to what we have.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to leave questions, comments, or concerns, please email podcast@coparentacademy.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen.